Greetings, one and all. My name is Joe Fizz, and today I'm here to introduce this new podcast called Third Shift Thoughts with Joe Fizz. So, something about Third Shift Thoughts that we need to take into consideration and think about is that this is a different kind of podcast in a certain way. So, the concept of Third Shift Thoughts is as a third shift worker, you tend to think about things in the middle of the night that you want to remember for the morning. So, for example, last night I was trying to think about how to do an origin story for this podcast, how I got into podcasting, where do my thoughts come from, etc. The problem with that is I forgot. So here I am, trying to start this new podcast, trying to get you guys called into, this thing that I do, this hobby that I do for fun, and I don't really know what to talk about. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a little bit of an origin story, in addition to explaining something that I absolutely love to do, and kind of talk about that a little bit and kind of give you a concept of what goes down. So in the beginning, how to explain this is that I'm not a subject matter expert in anything. So being a subject matter expert, certain people like last podcast on the left, they are very centric towards, a lot of deep, heavy research into providing a product each week that talks about, ghosts and ghoulies and aliens and thieves and robbers and murderers, serial killers, things like that. Me, I'm not a subject matter expert on anything. The only thing I'm really a subject matter expert on is vinyl records, and I will probably do a couple different reviews and such throughout this. But at the same time, that's not really how the podcast goes. It's just entertaining thoughts in a way that almost would reflect Seinfeld in the essence of it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense why I'm thinking it. It just happened to pop into my head. It's completely random. And I'm going to do my best to collectively think about it throughout the course of the day or whenever the episode needs to be posted. And then in my completely tired haze throughout the day, I'm going to try and record it. Now, if this was ideal, we would make the podcast at night during the third shift. But I have to work, so that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So to kind of get into a little bit more of a background about me, where, first off, some of you were probably thinking, where the heck did the name Joe Fizz come from? Well, you see, Joe Fizz was a nickname that was given to me by my aunt and my cousins when I was really little. So what ended up happening was that my cousins, being young like myself, they didn't know how to pronounce Joseph. It's kind of a weird name. It's, I guess, it's just a weird name to pronounce when you're younger, trying to formulate words and such. So what ended up happening was my cousin looked at me and was like, "What's up, Joe Fizz?" And then the younger cousins were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." So it caught on that I was Joe Fizz. And so that became the nickname that was put out. So I was thinking, on third shift, I was trying to pick out what exactly would be a cool moniker. I know most of you know me from, day to day, but I thought it'd be really cool just in case if this ever reaches a larger audience to incorporate that into this and to who I am. And Fizz also just has a really cool sound to it. So I thought, Joe Fizz would be a fantastic, fantastic name. In addition to that, the reason why I kind of want to do this is because I'm very centric on creating something that lasts. Part of my personality is that I really like to dig in and I love to put my mind to things and think. And I really love to make something that will last for somebody. I'm not saying that anything's going to happen because we never wish that upon ourselves. And if we do, we reach out for help. But one of the things that I would really love to see is that this, when I'm older, I've done this for so many years, kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, however it works out, they can come back, and friends and family, they can come back and listen to this thing that I made, and hopefully my personality comes out through it. I don't know I really don't know how this is going to end up. It's just going to be episodic. There's not really going to be serials like my previous podcast, Graymore, is going to be. It is something that I want to put out there just because I know some people probably miss me on the day-to-day, probably wondering what I'm thinking on certain topics in the world. And I will try to do them as, squared away as possible. Beyond that, and the Joe Fizz, nickname as a kid, had pretty humble beginnings. Lived in the country all my life. Recently moved to the city of Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. For those of you who didn't get that reference, I would definitely recommend the movie Spinal Tap. It's pretty fantastic. Might talk about it a little bit later on in this. Try to avoid copyright as much as possible, copyright issues as much as possible. So my goal is to reference these things and then have you go out and look at them or listen to them or watch them. Do your own research, but provide something that gives an origin of sorts. High school was pretty interesting. We're going to move on into high school because who gives a crap about elementary school? High school for me was pretty awesome. I had a lot of really great friends. Most of them I play D&D with every Monday night, which is hella cool because I love playing D&D. And, I'm definitely an advocate for destigmatizing it. It is something that I personally look forward to as an escape, as something that I can pour into. As I've talked about with this podcast, it's my self-care, which I think we'll have to go through a self-care episode later to kind of go through, in case you never engaged in self-care, in case you ever want to go through self-care, we can talk about it. However, for me, I have friends from high school. I play with D&D with them on Monday nights. I have friends that I still go home and visit. We ride the roads or ride motorcycles, or we just sit around and play video games. I'm very attached to my hometown. I don't want to disclose it because, just like privacy on my own part in case something like that comes up into the future. However, high school was fun. I don't think I'd really change much about it. Probably the only thing I would change is that I had more hands so that I could do more activities and more time to hang out with everybody more. Not really a whole lot to talk about with it. I got into acting, and I think that's how I got into the podcast stuff later. But I did, let's see here. I'm trying to think of all the things I did. I'm probably going to forget something. I did, soccer for 4 years. I did basketball for a year. I did marching band for 3, concert and pep band for 3. Acting, as I said. I did a little bit of a speech club. It's sad when you start to forget things that you did. But there's really not a whole lot to talk about with it. When I got into college, though, I ended up going 4 years at 4-year university. I didn't really step out and try and shine as much as I did in high school, but I still went and I still did my best. And ending up pretty well. Got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So technically I should be a subject matter expert of that. However, I'm very humble. I don't want to put that out there. A little bit of the material has been lost in time because it hasn't been in practice. But I do know a little bit about the criminal justice system as a whole. My minor was in political science, and I know this is going to be a trigger for some of you. I definitely do not want to offset that. I definitely don't want to put you in a situation where you feel that this podcast is leaning one way or the other. I know some of you might end up in that conclusion. I personally try not to lean one way or the other. The goal for leaning not one way or the other is that I have the subjectivity or the ability to look at all sides of the problem and then pick accordingly. there are some things I stand on, obviously, that, will lean one way or the other. For example, I think the security of the country is really important. Now, the reason why I bring up this kind of a topic is that it's subjective, which means here that, it can change. It doesn't have to necessarily be this certain policy or this certain policy. We need to, and we'll talk about this in the podcast too, we need to have the ability to look at something in a way that we negate our own biases and recognize and negate our own biases in order to be able to pick the best possible outcome. Sometimes that might mean we have to, I know the current jargon is to reach across the aisle to the opposing side, but the goal shouldn't be this self-righteous side of right or wrong. The goal should be what is going to be the best for everything at large. And for everything at large, in this case, it would be including the country. So I dabbled a little bit in this political science, enough to minor in it. People were telling me I should have done music because that is one of my passions, which we will talk about here in a little bit, in about 4 or 5 minutes. So other than that, I really started to like the political science aspect, and I started to delve into it more and considered going to graduate school for my master's degree. So I made an application to my master's program, and I got in. So my master's degree, because I get asked all the time what it is in, it is a Master's of Arts in Political Science that I'm working towards right now. It is political science, and then the subsect of it is security studies, which can mean a couple different things. It can mean, intelligence analysis. It can be overall security. It can be, other various types of things within that field. The looking, as far as like what I want to do with it, I'm not sure. I might end up discussing it on this podcast at some point. I don't think I probably will, because it's kind of a personal thing, which is funny because all of this is personal if you really think about it. But I don't want to, again, put myself out there in a way that will hinder me from such prospects. So my goal is to make this podcast, humorous, a little funny, not too self-indulging. Not that I have anything to hide, but just for my own and my family's own privacy and sake, that is the goal for that. So we're coming up on the first 15-minute block. Basically how this podcast is going to run, I'm going to do roughly 30 minutes of talk. Sorry if you want, music or something else going on in the background. I'm going to test with this first, and then following that, if y'all have any comments or questions, I'm going to set up a Facebook page. Twitter, I don't really use all that much because it's just, I liked it a little bit and then it just died off for me. I'll probably throw out my email too, just in case you have more comments and questions. You can email me, and I can work on bettering this podcast for the future. Again, and this is the first test episode. This is the first dry run. So I'm just kind of, doing something. So now that we kind of went through my origin story a tiny bit, I think we're going to delve into some of my favorite things that are coming up. I'll probably spend about like 5 minutes talking about each. But I think instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of the topics that is most near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to spend the most time talking about it. And that, for me personally, is vinyl records. I love going out into towns and, looking at their record shops. But before I do that, we're going to incorporate a little music break. So please forgive the GarageBand loops that I'm going to use, but everybody needs a little music in their lives, so I'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back to Third Shift Thoughts. After that brief random music interlude, so I was kind of noticing with the podcast that I was making, while I was listening to certain parts during the interlude, I probably should talk a lot slower. But at the same time, if anyone knows me, I talk pretty fast as it is. So if you can't keep up, thought my microphone was about ready to take the big plummet, but that's okay. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to, try my best to go a little bit slower, but we shall see how that ends up going. So one of the things that in my hobby list that is near and dear to my heart is going to vinyl record stores or just music stores in general and digging through the album collection. So a lot of people who personally know me will definitely say the first thing out of my mouth will probably either be a Scott Pilgrim versus the World reference, or that I prefer and love to go look for vinyl records. So for those of you who don't know or don't really care about why it's really cool to go to a record store, I'm going to lay it out for you. So, for example, you have your phone, you are looking at your phone, and you have this artist that you absolutely love. Let's just say, for example, I was going to say Prince, but I wasn't really feeling Prince today. I'm trying to think of what kind of day it is. Let's just say it's oh gosh, why is this so hard? Let's just go with a fairly popular artist, Coldplay. So Coldplay, for example, they've got, I think it's like, let me look here. I think it's like 7 albums. So if you're looking just studio albums, Coldplay has Parachutes, Rush of Blood to the Head, X and Y, Viva La Vida, Milo Xyloto, Ghost Stories, and Head Full of Dreams. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I was right, 7 albums. They have 7 albums worth of material. This material, you can just access on your phone. No big deal. But take for a minute, if you will, and think about this. So, for example, I have this record store that I absolutely love and adore, and it's called Magnolia Thunderpussy, which is really funny. I don't get why it's called Magnolia Thunderpussy. All I know is that there is this crimson cat, and it's listening through headphones and just kind of like with its hand up. And it's one of the greatest places and one of the most comforting places that I've ever been to, except being in downtown Columbus, where you have to make sure that your meter is full or else they're going to ticket you right there on High Street. So being there, I'm personally right now really, really into, Frank Zappa. I really enjoy Nirvana. So let's use, that's really actually a better example. Let's use Nirvana. Nirvana has 4 studio albums. 3 technically if you want to go for Bleach, Nevermind, and In Utero. And then 4 technically with Insecticide. Those are kind of, demos-ish as far as I can tell. But anyway, let's just use Nirvana, for example. So let's say they have only the 4 albums. You go into a record store. You take the time out of your day to say, I'm going to go and I'm going to look for this album. So some people probably don't care about album artwork. Some people probably don't care about, the process of taking the songs from acetate, which is essentially like where you're playing live in the studio and there is a disc where it cuts into the disc the sounds that you were making. This process is really cool. If you're recording live to acetate, as Third Man Records does, it's a really intense process because whatever, there are no do-overs. Whatever goes into that acetate, it's there. So it's a pretty expensive process, but I think it's a really fascinating and cool process. So, you were taking the time out of your day to drive to this place to dig through bins and bins and bins to find these albums that spoke to you. I know some people don't care about music, so to kind of enlighten you on what it's like to love and experience this music so much that you just absolutely love, it is looking at, I love this so much that I'm taking the time out of my day to go get it, using my gas money to drive to it. I want to go dig for hours to try and find this record. And also too, I like all kinds of music, so it's cool to see the different album covers as I go through. It's cool to pick up a sealed copy, or if it's unsealed, it's the smell. It's like an old book. If you love the smell of old books, some of them are attached to coffee shops, like the one that's in Tremont, which is called The Loop. It is attached to a coffee shop, so that's kind of cool. People kind of cycle through and put on records as they go. Having this concept, though, being able to go to the store and to look for this is a lot of fun, especially if you're with friends, because say, for example, I like Nirvana and my wife, Alex, really likes Katy Perry. She'll find a Katy Perry record, like an actual vinyl album, and she'll show it to me. And I'm like, that's really cool. Especially too, sometimes with these records, they'll have alternate artworks. For example, I don't know if anyone's a fan of the Gorillaz, the band, but Plastic Beach is set on a sunset. But the one that I have, the vinyl record alternative, it's daytime. So it's really cool to see the different artworks play out in that regard. But, you're taking the time to go to the store, as I've said 3 times already. You're taking the time to dig through the bins. The other thing, too, is the find. The find is awesome. When you find the record that you've been looking for, there's an emotional attachment to it. You are actually owning or about to own this music. Think about that. Today we find that in regards to music, that's why I used to love iTunes, is because you're paying for this music. I know some people don't like to pay for things. Makes sense. I don't like to pay for things either. I'm an adult. Bills suck. But the point is that you are taking the time to go look for this record, buy this record, invest your money into this record. Records, depending on the record, holds a lot of value. I know I have a couple Beatles ones that I haven't opened that hold a lot of value in today's market. I specifically have another copy of another record that I really don't want to talk about on the podcast in case, it's brought up, but it's a Prince record. that I know I can't get anywhere else. And I found it in this record store. That's the other appeal about this, is that you're going into the store. And for Nirvana, for example, say if somebody gave up their collection, they were in Germany and they had a bootleg copy of a live show. So a bootleg copy means that it wasn't technically gone or like produced through a recording company, for example, like RCA Victor or Sony or EMI or there's another big one, Columbia. Those recording companies, those producers, things like that. But they will have these random live shows that you can't really get anywhere else. It's cool to find, what album artwork did they put on it. For example, I have a Nirvana album. It's called Not So Saturday Live. Not So Saturday Night Live. Or no, sorry. Saturday Not So Live. No. Saturday Night Not So Live. There it is. And anyway, on the album cover, it's got Kurt, Chris Novoselic, and Dave Grohl in caricature. And then in the background, it has the stage, and it has John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd of Blues Brothers fame. And it's really cool to have this album because I know I can't get this on iTunes, Spotify. You might be able to find it on YouTube, but it's not in a quantified collection like this. So it's really cool to find those kind of things and to own the music, because taking the ownership out of music, it makes it a lot less personal. I think that's one of the major downfalls of the digital era, is that it's taken a lot of social aspects out of the music too. Like, I know that, it's easily accessible on your phone to be like, oh, hey, here's the new Coldplay album. Cool. But, there's the anticipation, there's the buildup, there's the, I can't wait to see this record. Now, we have to take into account that there are certain records that have a certain number of quantity. So, for example, I have a pressing of Sage and Spirit, which is a Grateful Dead album that they teamed up with Dogfish Head IPA, the brewing company, to make. It's on colored vinyl, which, if you didn't know, records can be on multiple colors. I have several that are multicolored. I have several that are monocolored. The standard of those is typically black for the vinyl. And there are only 2,000 copies of this Grateful Dead record. So I'm one person of the 2,000 that have this one record. Now, thinking on that, you're going to say, okay, Joe, why does it matter? Why would I want to invest in this? I have to buy a turntable. I have to buy a stereo. The biggest thing that I want to say to this too, once you bring the record home, even if it's just for your own personal use, there is an aspect to it where it is communal. You say, for example, you have somebody over and you're talking about a band. It's just really an interesting timepiece to be able to say, oh, I have the new record. You want me to put it on? And, once you take the record and you put it on the turntable and you hit the needle arm button for it to be able to go over, or if you drop your own needle, you just hear this, you're hearing this crackle, and then you hear, and you can tell that the record has entered the groove. And once that happens, there's just this magic. It's the anticipation, as I said. It's the wanting to hear it. It's being able to talk about it. It's relaxing too to see the vinyl spin around at 33 repetitions per minute. It's engrossing. You want, at least on my end, to just sit and stare at it. That's why people make different slip mats and things like that, just to see them spin around. Some of the more clear records that I have, I'm able to see my slip mat underneath it, because the way that it works is, you have this vinyl record. You don't want it to get scratched on just the standard slip mat that the turntable company gave you. So for me, for example, I have one that says Third Man Vault member, which the vault is Jack White of the White Stripes, Raconteurs, Dead Weather, and Solo fame. He made this group where they put out exclusive records from his record company quarterly. So having that as my own personal turntable, that's something really cool and kind of exclusive for me. But being engrossed in this record, it's taking the time to commit into your music. It's taking time to maybe invest in somebody near you. The only downside, and this is the part that actually really sucks about records, you can't jump around. The records can skip if you move or drop something or something like that. So you have to tread carefully. I almost call it the turntable walk, where you're stepping on your tiptoes basically to move around. But this is something that I think we've lost in culture today. I think that, yes, our music is more accessible, and yes, it's easier to go on road trips and stuff because you don't have to do a mixtape, which I think mixtapes are cooler anyway. Or, have a record player in your car. But at the same time, this concept is, really, really cool, where you're taking the time to sit down, you're taking the time to actually invest in the music, or you can walk around the house with a turntable if you have, like multi-channel surround sound in your house. But just having that ability to invest into this record, to actually sit and pay attention to what this artist has tried to do for you. It's something that I think we have lost. We just take it for granted now that we pay $10 to Spotify and we get this whole slew of music just out of there. But this artist has taken so much time, so much energy to craft this piece. Another thing, a single, just a 7-inch single, which is, an A and B side. That's one thing, but an actual album that somebody has taken the time for, we don't take the time for them, which is really sad considering they have taken the time for us. So these records, these things that, we, or at least I, hold on to so dearly, you might find a song that wasn't popular on the radio that you absolutely love, that this artist has really thought out. And, just because it doesn't have the same drum and bass as, every other record, or every other single on the radio, that doesn't mean that's not a good song. Case in point, Coldplay has a really great song called Everglow. Very soft, very cumbersome. It's something that, on a record, because vinyl records have the ability to open up the full sound, whereas MP3 tracks are what's called compressed, where sometimes things get muffled over or they're not as visible as they're used to. With this record, with Everglow, you can hear the piano, you can hear it echo, you can hear just how much heart and soul Chris Martin is pouring into this song about Gwyneth Paltrow. It's really beautiful thing to experience, and having that open and full sound, being able to hear everything that's going on is a game changer, I think, for me. Some people might throw around the audiophile trope at me, or they might throw this or that around, but I think it's something more. It's something worth at least trying once, investing in, seeing if you actually like it, because they hold their value. Like I said, they're a communal thing. Even if you're just by yourself, it's comforting to have and hear the distinct pop. You never forget your first record. My first record for me was Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks, and it changed my whole life. Hearing the pop and then it dropping into Tangle Up in Blue. Artists now are recognizing that this is a platform, even modern artists. Recently I've seen, the Black Panther soundtrack on, in record stores and on vinyl. I've seen Arctic Monkeys, Bon Iver, Iron and Wine, Gorillaz, for example, as I've previously mentioned, hip hop artists. I know Watsky is one that I've really enjoyed having a couple of his on vinyl. It's just a different platform. It's something to look into. And if you have any questions about it, I'd be more happy to talk about it on the podcast. But I have gone 5 minutes over, which is not what I wanted to do for the first episode. But I think, this was a good episode to start off, and I just wanted to close on this topic of vinyl with Dig the Groove. It's, even if you just go to your local record store and you ask them to just put on a record, just a random one, just to have the experience to know off of, and that way if you want to do it or not. So in conclusion of the podcast for today, I just want to say I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it's what you thought it was going to be. I hope it's, in time, it gets even better. But this first episode, I know the origin story took a little more time than what I was hoping it would. But I'm hoping that this next episode is even better than this one. I'll hopefully dive into like weirder topics, stuff that is actually like a third shifty thought. But in conclusion, I just wanted to leave you with the slogan, which I have to find, that I came up with. Oh, well, that's funny. I didn't find it. So anyway, I will leave you with this for today. Dig the groove. Go out and look at your local record store. Craft your own origin story. Maybe someone around you would want to know. And for this episode, my name is Joe Fizz, and I hope you have a really great day. Third Shift Thoughts is produced, recorded, and written by Joseph Byers. It is powered by Pinecast.com. Comments, questions, concerns? Email us at josrbyers@gmail.com. And we will do our best to get back with you and straighten everything out. And as always, keep thinking those deep, deep thoughts. And when you step out into the daylight, tell somebody that you know. We'll see you next time.